In a peaceful meadow, there lived a curious rabbit and a graceful swan. While the rabbit spent its days hopping around, the swan elegantly glided on the surface of the pond. Despite their differences in size and appearance, the rabbit and the swan became the best of friends. They would frolic together and share stories under the shimmering moonlight. One day, a fierce storm swept through the meadow, causing the pond to overflow. The rabbit was in danger of being swept away by the powerful currents. Without hesitation, the swan spread her wings and swooped down to rescue her little friend. She carried the rabbit to safety and sheltered him from the storm. After the storm subsided, the rabbit and the swan sat by the edge of the pond, reflecting on their experience. The rabbit was deeply grateful for the swan's rescue. The swan, in turn, expressed her willingness to do anything for a friend. That night, the sky was adorned with stars. The rabbit and the swan engaged in deep conversation as they gazed at the heavens. Eventually, the rabbit made a decision. "We can't stay here anymore," he said. "The storm has ruined everything. We need to find a new home." The swan agreed with the rabbit. "I also want to explore new places," she said. "Perhaps we can migrate to distant lands." The next morning, the rabbit and the swan set off together. For days, they walked and explored many new places. They were on track to find a new home. However, as time went on, their journey became more difficult. One day, while walking through a dark forest, they encountered a wild fox. The fox was ready to attack the rabbit. Just then, the swan spread her wings, scaring off the fox and keeping her friends safe. Another day, a heavy rain began to fall. The rain was so intense that it caused a flood. The rabbit and the swan were swept away by the floodwaters. Luckily, they managed to cling to a tree and waited for the floodwaters to recede. As their journey progressed, they began to struggle to find food. They had been starving for days and were becoming weak. Finally, they found a fruit tree and satisfied their hunger. As the journey stretched on, the rabbit and the swan grew tired. They could no longer walk as quickly as before. One day, they decided to rest in a cave. While sleeping in the cave, they encountered a fox. The fox wanted to eat them, but the rabbit and the swan managed to deceive the fox and escaped from the cave. As they approached the end of their journey, the rabbit and the swan began to feel sad about the idea of parting ways. They had experienced so much together and had become deeply attached to each other. These challenging experiences only strengthened the friendship between the rabbit and the swan. Through their love and trust in each other, they managed to overcome all difficulties. Eventually, they arrived at a lush valley. In the valley, there was a lake and a small cabin by its shore. The rabbit and the swan approached the cabin. Since the door was open, they entered inside. Inside the cabin, there was an old woman sitting. The woman was surprised to see the rabbit and the swan. "Where did you come from?" she asked. The rabbit and the swan told her their stories. After listening, the old woman said, "You can stay here with me." Once the rabbit and the swan entered the old woman's cabin, they noticed a sparrow hiding in a corner. The sparrow hissed at the rabbit and the swan. The old woman said, "Don't mind him. Our sparrow is a bit jealous." After the rabbit and the swan started living with the old woman, the sparrow constantly clashed with them. He tried to steal their food and even attempted to bite them while they swam in the lake. The rabbit and the swan grew tired of the sparrow. One day, while swimming in the lake, the sparrow suddenly fell into the water. Without hesitation, the rabbit and the swan jumped in to rescue the sparrow. After pulling the sparrow out of the water and drying it with a towel, they brought it back to the cabin. Feeling ashamed, the sparrow apologized to the rabbit and the swan, promising never to behave poorly again. The rabbit and the swan forgave the sparrow. From that day on, the rabbit, the swan, and the sparrow became the best of friends. They played together, swam in the lake, and shared stories with the old woman. The sparrow no longer felt jealous but instead cherished the love and friendship of the rabbit and the swan. The old woman was delighted to see the friendship among the rabbit, the swan, and the sparrow. Their stories showed that true friendship can overcome anything. The rabbit and the swan were very pleased. The old woman was very kind and hospitable. She gave them delicious meals and allowed them to sleep in soft beds. The rabbit, the swan, and the sparrow began to live happily with the old woman. They swam in the lake, ran in the valley, and shared stories with the old woman every day. Over time, they befriended other animals living in the valley. One day, the old woman fell ill. The animals never left her side. As the old woman took her last breath, the rabbit and the swan held her hands. "Thank you," she said. "You became family to me." After the old woman passed away, the animals were very sad. But they decided to keep her memories alive. They continued to live in the cabin and started helping other animals in the valley. For years, the rabbit, the swan, and the sparrow lived happily in the valley. They showed that true friendship and love can conquer anything. From that day on, the bond between the rabbit, the swan, and the sparrow grew even stronger. They showed that true friendship knows no boundaries and that love and compassion can conquer all. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.